The room went silent when my father-in-law, Victor, stood up from his chair. His hand rested on the mahogany table like a king claiming a throne. Everyone at the Sunday family dinner stared at him. My wife, Patricia, sat beside me, frozen. I already knew what was coming. I'd felt it building for months like a storm nobody else could see. My name is Aaron. Aaron Patterson. I think it's time we acknowledge the truth, Victor announced, his voice smooth and confident. Patterson and Associates is family property now. It always should have been. The name of my business hung in the air like an insult. I'd built Patterson and Associates from nothing, literally nothing. A borrowed laptop, a basement office, and determination that kept me awake most nights. My wife Patricia had supported me through those early years. She believed in me when I had nothing but ideas. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply finished my water and remained calm. Everyone waited for an explosion. Instead, they got silence. My silence was mistaken for surrender, and that mistake would be the foundation of everything that came next. After dinner, Patricia pulled me aside in the kitchen. Her face was pale. "He just said that in front of everyone," she whispered. "Your business. He claimed it was family property. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because," I said, watching her carefully. "Words in anger solve nothing. Actions speak louder." But inside, my mind was already calculating. I'd been expecting this moment for exactly 7 months. I knew what Victor wanted, how far he'd go, and most importantly, I knew he believed I was weak. He believed that my kindness over the years, the help I'd given his family, the profits I'd shared, the doors I'd opened, had made me vulnerable. He was wrong about that. Over the next few days, my family's reactions proved how completely Victor had rewritten the narrative. My brother-in-law asked if I was finally letting the family participate. My mother-in-law congratulated Victor on taking charge. Even casual colleagues seemed to think the announcement meant something official was happening. Victor had prepared the story perfectly. Everyone believed his version before I'd even had the chance to speak my own. I decided to show Patricia the beginning of this story by taking her to my office on a Saturday morning. The building was quiet, just the hum of the air conditioning and the echo of our footsteps. I pulled out a photo from my desk drawer. It was from 12 years ago. Me, completely broke, holding the lease agreement for a tiny office space downtown. "This is where it started," I said. "Not with family money, not with help, just with me." Patricia looked at the photo, then at the office around her, now expanded, professional, full of talented people I'd hired and trained. She touched my shoulder. "He never even asked how you built this." Exactly. Victor had never asked because asking would have required listening. Instead, he'd made assumptions based on what he wanted to believe. He wanted to believe that the business had somehow come from him, that his general presence in our lives meant he deserved ownership of something he'd never touched. I walked Patricia through my entire journey. How I'd started with one client and turned it into dozens. How I'd made mistakes and learned from them. How every success was built on risk I'd taken personally, on money I'd invested that was entirely my own. The business wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It was about identity. It was about proving something to myself. When Victor first started becoming involved with the business, it seemed innocent. He'd ask questions at family dinners. He'd offer suggestions. I appreciated his interest, or at least I thought I did. I opened doors for him. I gave him access to meetings. I explained my strategy, my vision, my long-term plans. I believed in the power of family. I believed that transparency and trust would build bridges. I was naive in ways I didn't fully understand yet. "Your father wants to help," Patricia would say. "He just wants to be part of something successful." So I let him in. Slowly, carefully, but I let him in. I showed him our client list. I introduced him to key team members. I even let him sit in on strategy meetings. I told myself this was what family did. We supported each other. We shared victories. I genuinely wanted Victor to feel valued and included. What I didn't realize was that I was handing him the blueprint. Every conversation, every document he reviewed, every meeting he attended, it was all building his understanding of exactly what the business was worth and exactly how he might take it. The first time Victor overstepped, it was so small I almost missed it. He called one of my major clients directly, not to check on something, but to suggest a strategy adjustment that contradicted my approach. The client was confused. She called me to ask which direction to take. I felt the unease immediately, that uncomfortable twist in my stomach. This wasn't innocent involvement. This was testing boundaries. I knew what was happening, even though I didn't want to admit it. When I mentioned it to Victor later, he shrugged. I was just trying to help. I thought I could add value. I appreciate it, I said carefully, but our clients work directly with me. Let's keep it that way. He smiled like my concern was cute. Of course, just trying to be useful. But the boundary had been crossed, and more importantly, he'd learned something crucial. He could reach out directly, and nothing terrible would happen. I wouldn't fire him. I wouldn't cut him off. I was too polite, too committed to family harmony. He could test another boundary next time and the time after that. Behind closed doors, Victor was reframing everything. I heard about it later through Patricia, who'd finally started paying attention to her father's conversations. He told Mom that you're basically obligated to share profits with him, Patricia said one evening. He said it was the least you could do after all the family support you've received. I laughed, but it was bitter. What family support? My parents helped me through college. That's it. I know, Patricia said. That's what I told him. He didn't care. He's already decided that your kindness means he's earned something from the business. This is how it happens. This is how someone's generosity gets weaponized. I'd been kind, and my kindness was being reframed as proof of obligation. I'd been open, and my openness was being presented as weakness. My desire for family harmony was being transformed into an assumption that I'd eventually surrender. Victor started telling people at his country club that he was helping run my business. He mentioned it casually to mutual acquaintances. He positioned himself as a benefactor, someone guiding a younger man toward success. Nobody corrected him. Why would they? They had no reason to doubt his version of events. The financial entanglement started when Victor asked if he could take a temporary loan from the business. Just for a few months, he said. A real estate opportunity had come up. He'd pay it back with interest once the property sold. I should have said no. Some part of me knew I should say no. But Patricia asked me to help her father. And I wanted to be the kind of man who helped his family when they needed it. So I said yes. The loan was $50,000. It seemed like an enormous sum to me, money I'd worked years to accumulate. But I believed Victor. I believed in family. I believed this temporary arrangement was just kindness flowing in a different direction. Victor never repaid a single dollar. Instead, months later, he asked if we could formalize his access to company profits. Not as debt, but as compensation for his guidance and influence. Before I could answer, he'd already started withdrawing money regularly. The amounts grew larger. The explanations became vague. When I finally confronted him about it, he looked at me like I was being unreasonable. I thought we were family, he said. Family doesn't count every dollar. That phrase became his defense. Whenever I questioned his access, his withdrawals, his decisions, family doesn't count every dollar. As if having a family relationship meant I'd surrendered the right to understand my own finances. By the time Victor made his public claim at dinner, he'd already spent months building his reputation as the man behind my success. People knew him. They'd seen him at my office. He'd subtly positioned himself as the strategic mind, while I was just the younger guy executing his vision. The humiliation of it was sharp and constant. I'd walk into business meetings where people would reference something Victor had said. I'd see social media posts where he tagged himself in photos from company events, positioning himself as a founder. He'd even started his own consulting side business, using access to my company's strategies as proof of his expertise. I watched him gain social credit while my reputation became increasingly attached to his influence. People started asking me questions that suggested Victor had already decided the answers. How's Victor's latest idea working out? They'd ask, not realizing how their words had shifted me from owner to employee in their minds. The worst part was that I'd let it happen. My passivity, my desire to maintain peace, my belief that truth would eventually speak for itself. All of it had worked in his favor. I'd given him the space to reshape the narrative completely. Patricia noticed it too. She'd become quieter over those months, watching her father build his empire on the foundation of my work. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment mixed with something else. Disappointment in her father, I think. But maybe also disappointment in me for allowing it to continue. What nobody knew, not even Patricia, was that I had documentation. 7 months before Victor's public claim, I'd walked into my lawyer's office and had a conversation that changed everything. I want to protect myself, I'd told my lawyer, Marcus Webb. I'd explained the situation, the boundary crossings, the financial requests, the growing claims of ownership. Marcus had listened carefully. Then he'd done exactly what I needed him to do. He drafted a crystal-clear contract outlining ownership of Patterson and Associates. The document specified that I was the sole owner and operator. It detailed Patricia's role as a shareholder and spouse, but it made absolutely clear that no family members had ownership stakes unless I explicitly chose to provide them. The contract was executed properly, witnessed, notarized, and filed with a timestamp that proved it existed long before Victor's dinner declaration. I kept that contract in a locked drawer in my office. I told nobody about it. Not because I was planning revenge, but because I was protecting my future. Every conversation I had with Victor after that point felt different, knowing that truth existed in that document, waiting quietly for the moment when it would matter. 3 weeks after the family dinner, Victor came to my office privately. I could see the confidence radiating off him. He believed he'd already won. "We need to make this official," he said, sitting across from my desk. "I want my name added to the business registration. I think it's only fair." This was the ultimatum, whether he framed it that way or not. He was done testing boundaries. He was ready for the final move. "That's not going to happen," I said calmly. "It's not your choice," he replied, his voice hardening. "Patricia's my daughter. This business is family property now. I've decided, and I'm going to announce it publicly. At the company anniversary party next weekend. Everyone will be there. Your entire staff, your clients, your business partners. They need to know the truth about who really runs things here." He stood up, already imagining his victory. "You can either accept this gracefully, or you can look like a fool who doesn't understand how family works. Either way, Patterson and Associates belongs to our family now. To me." I watched him leave my office. He was so certain, so absolutely convinced of his own power. He believed that the force of his will, combined with the public announcement, would make his claim real. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The company anniversary party was scheduled for Saturday evening at the Riverside Hotel. The reservation had been made months ago. Over 200 people were invited. My entire staff, our major clients, business partners, friends, and yes, my family. Victor had chosen his stage perfectly. A crowd of people who mattered, all gathered in one place, all ready to hear him announce that he claimed my life's work. I spent the week before the party taking care of details nobody would notice. I called Marcus, my lawyer, and confirmed he would attend. I asked him to arrive early and speak with me in private before the party officially began. I also called Thomas Elliott, the owner of our largest client company. Thomas had been working with me since the early days. He knew my character. He knew my work. I asked him to be present and available during the party. Patricia sensed something was happening. She kept asking if I was okay, if I was nervous, if I wanted to talk about what Victor planned to do. I kept telling her that everything would be fine. I kept asking her to trust me. "I do trust you," she said quietly, "but I'm scared. My father has convinced half our family that he owns part of your business. Some of them are planning to back him up at the party. They're going to stand with him. Then they'll see the truth," I said, "and the truth will stand against them." I meant every word. Saturday evening arrived cold and clear. I dressed in a dark suit, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed confidence or defiance. I wanted to look like myself, like the man who'd built something real through honest work. Patricia wore a navy dress. She was quiet on the drive to the hotel, her hand gripping mine tightly. I could feel her anxiety, her uncertainty about what would happen. Victor, I knew, was probably preparing his speech. He'd probably written and rewritten it, practicing the moment when he'd stand before everyone and claim that Patterson and Associates was family property. He probably imagined applause or at least acceptance. He'd built his narrative so carefully that he truly believed people would understand it as justice rather than theft. The party was already in full swing when we arrived. My team had decorated beautifully, soft lighting, photographs from company milestones on the walls, displays showing our growth over the years. I could see clients laughing with staff members. I could see partnerships being strengthened in real time. This was what I'd built. This moment, this community, this success, it was all real. Victor stood near the entrance, already greeting people, already working the room. He nodded at me with a smile that said everything. Soon, he was thinking, very soon, all of this will be mine to announce. As the evening progressed, I stayed calm. Outwardly, I was fine. I congratulated my team members. I thanked clients for their business. I gave a short speech about how grateful I was for the community we'd built together. Nobody in that room could have guessed that I was waiting for something, that every breath was measured, that my calmness wasn't peace. It was the calm before a storm. Victor watched me the entire time. When I finished my speech, he started clapping, loud and slow. Others joined in. He was already writing the next chapter in his mind, already positioning himself as the generous benefactor who'd let the young man have his moment before stepping in to claim what was actually his. Then Marcus, my lawyer, appeared at my side. He nodded at me. Everything was ready. "I have one more thing," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying easily across the room. "I'd like to introduce my attorney, Marcus Webb. He has some important information to share with all of us." The room quieted. You could feel the shift, the confusion, the curiosity, the first hint that something unexpected was happening. Victor's expression changed. His confidence wavered for just a moment. Marcus took the microphone. He was professional, calm, and absolutely thorough. "Good evening," Marcus said. "I'm here as counsel for the owner of Patterson and Associates, which is my client sitting right here. I understand there's been some question about ownership of this business. I'm here to clarify that question once and for all." Marcus pulled out a document. Even from across the room, I could see the official seal, the witness signatures, the notary mark. He held it up so everyone could see. "This is the ownership contract for Patterson and Associates," he announced. "It was executed 7 months ago, properly witnessed and notarized. It clearly specifies sole ownership and operational control." Victor stepped forward. "That document doesn't mean anything," he said loudly. "Family property exists outside of legal paperwork." "If I may finish," Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "This contract is binding. It's legal. It's been filed appropriately. And more importantly, it proves that the owner of this business understood, even then, exactly how important it was to protect what he'd built." The room was completely silent now. Marcus adjusted his glasses and read directly from the contract. "Patterson and Associates is the sole property of the listed owner, with full operational and financial control residing with that individual. No family members or external parties hold ownership stakes, decision-making authority, or claim to profits without explicit written consent from the owner. Executed in the same manner as this document." He looked up from the paper. "Those are the terms. They're clear. They're unambiguous. And they were established 7 months ago." Thomas Elliott, my major client, stood up. "I can attest to this," he said firmly. "I've known this man for 15 years. He built this company from nothing. His work is his own. His success is his own." Other clients nodded. People I'd helped over the years, people who remembered the early days when I was struggling, started speaking up. The narrative was shifting. The room was beginning to understand that Victor's claim wasn't generosity or family wisdom. It was overreach. Victor's face turned red. He actually laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "This is ridiculous," he spat. "A piece of paper from 7 months ago doesn't change what we all know. This business has been a family endeavor." "Has it?" Marcus asked calmly. Because according to the financial records, which I've reviewed thoroughly, you contributed $0 to the startup. You provided no financing. You made no direct business decisions until very recently. And in fact, the financial withdrawals you've made in recent months, the ones you referred to as compensation for guidance, those totaled almost $75,000. The number hung in the air. Marcus continued. Those withdrawals were made without authorization. They were taken from a business you have no legal claim to. That technically makes them theft. The room exploded into whispers. Victor stood there, his confidence completely shattered, his face looking suddenly very small and very old. He looked at Patricia. He looked at me. He looked at the assembled crowd. I was just trying to help, he said, and even his voice sounded weaker now. No, I said, standing up. You were trying to take something that wasn't yours. You were trying to rewrite the story of my work and claim it as your own. And when I didn't stop you, you decided that silence meant permission. I could see family members looking at each other, suddenly uncertain. The narrative they'd accepted, the version of events Victor had sold them, it was crumbling. But here's what matters, I continued. I'm not angry. I'm not even surprised. What I am is clear. This business is mine. I built it. I'll continue to build it. And anyone who tries to claim otherwise will be met with exactly this. The truth, documented and undeniable. The witnesses' reactions shifted the entire room. I could see it happening in real time. People who'd been nodding along with Victor's narrative started looking uncomfortable. People who'd assumed his claims had merit started understanding that he'd lied, or at least massively overstated his role. My team looked stunned. I realized many of them didn't know about the earlier financial withdrawals, didn't understand the scope of what Victor had been doing. Now it was all public, all exposed, all impossible to deny. Patricia reached over and squeezed my hand. There were tears in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. She'd watched her father overreach, and now she was watching truth stand against his arrogance. Even some of Victor's supporters started drifting away. You could see them mentally revising their positions, understanding that they'd been manipulated by his narrative. The party continued, but the energy had completely shifted. Instead of Victor's triumph, it became a celebration of what I'd actually built. My team gathered around me. Clients offered congratulations. The evening transformed from what could have been a moment of public humiliation into a moment of public validation. The aftermath came quickly and efficiently. Marcus followed up the next day with formal notification that any further unauthorized withdrawals would result in legal action. Victor's access to company systems was terminated. The phone calls with confused family members began. People asking if what they'd heard was really true, if Victor had really been taking money, if he'd really made false claims about ownership. I had to explain the situation over and over. Each time, I found myself presenting facts without anger, laying out exactly what had happened and why the contract existed. The narrative that Victor had spent months building collapsed in a single evening because it couldn't stand against documented truth. Victor tried to recover. He reached out through Patricia, claiming he'd been misunderstood, that he'd never actually intended to formally claim ownership, that he was just speaking out of emotion and family pride. But the damage was done. His credibility was gone. His version of events was no longer believable. Some family members sided with him. They claimed I'd been cold and calculating, that I'd planned this confrontation, that I'd been waiting for a chance to humiliate him. Maybe they were right, but I didn't feel humiliated him. I'd simply presented the truth and let it speak for itself. A week later, Victor came to my office. I almost didn't agree to see him, but Patricia asked me to, so I did. He looked different, smaller somehow, older. The confidence was completely gone. I made a mistake, he said. I overstepped. I wanted to be part of something successful, and instead of earning it, I tried to claim it. I listened without responding. I'd like to come back, he continued, to be involved appropriately, to actually help in a way that's honest. I thought about this carefully. I thought about what Patricia would want. I thought about what forgiveness actually means. No, I said finally. I appreciate the apology. I accept it. But you don't get to be part of this anymore. You had a chance to be involved legitimately, and you chose to overreach instead. That decision has consequences. It wasn't cruel. It was clear. And it was necessary. Victor left without arguing. I think he understood that this wasn't negotiable. The legal resolution was straightforward. Victor agreed to repay the $75,000 he'd withdrawn. He agreed to maintain distance from the business. In exchange, I agreed not to press formal theft charges. It wasn't perfect, but it was closure. The financial impact on him was significant. He had to liquidate some investments. He had to reduce his lifestyle. But it was less than he deserved, really. I could have pressed charges. I could have pursued this aggressively through every legal channel available. Instead, I chose a settlement that allowed him to save some dignity while still facing real consequences. Patricia and I discussed whether this was the right choice. She ultimately supported it. "He's still my father," she said. "I don't want to destroy him. I just want him to understand that what he did was wrong." I understood. My anger at Victor was real, but it wasn't my primary emotion anymore. My primary emotion was relief. Relief that the waiting was over. Relief that truth had prevailed. Relief that I could finally move forward without this situation hanging over my head. The quiet after everything settled was strange. For so long, I'd been holding tension, managing the situation, preparing for the confrontation. Now that it was over, I felt almost unmoored. Patricia and I spent a weekend just being together, without talking about her father or the business or any of it. We watched movies. We went for walks. We remembered what it felt like to be a couple without external pressure crushing down on us. "I'm proud of you," Patricia said one evening. "I know that sounds simple, but I mean it. You could have exploded. You could have fought him emotionally, publicly, messily. Instead, you documented everything and let the truth speak for itself. I learned it from you," I said. "You taught me that strength is about staying calm under pressure." She smiled. "I taught you the easy part. You lived it in the hardest circumstances." 3 months after the party, I made significant changes to Patterson and Associates. I brought in new partners, people I trusted completely, people who'd proven themselves through years of dedication. I restructured the ownership to be more distributed among key team members, making sure that nobody could ever claim the entire company as their own, and that no single person could dominate decision-making. I also created a formal advisory board, but I was very careful about who I invited. Family members were not invited. That door was closed. The business actually grew stronger through these changes. With distributed ownership and real advisory input, we made better decisions. My team felt more invested in outcomes. Clients noticed the improvement in our work. Within a year, revenues had increased by 30%. I'd reclaimed not just my business, but my identity as its owner. The humiliation Victor had created was replaced with confidence. The uncertainty was replaced with clarity. A year after the party, I was invited to speak at a business conference. The topic was protecting your business, legal strategies for founders. I almost declined, but Marcus encouraged me to accept. "Your story matters," he said. "People need to know that documentation, clarity, and boundaries can protect them." So I spoke. I told the entire story, not to humiliate Victor, but to illustrate exactly why founders need to be clear about ownership, why contracts matter, why boundaries are actually expressions of respect rather than rejection. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of people approached me afterward with similar stories. Business partners who'd overstepped, family members who'd made inappropriate claims, co-founders who'd tried to rewrite history. Everyone wanted to know how I'd maintained calm, how I'd documented everything, how I'd let truth do the talking instead of emotion doing the screaming. I realized that Victor's overreach hadn't just affected me and Patricia. It had actually taught me something valuable that I could share with others. My experience, as painful as it was, had value beyond just my own life. Patterson and Associates now has 5 locations. My team has grown to include 47 employees. We've won business awards. We've been featured in publications. The business that Victor once tried to claim as family property is now stronger and more successful than he ever imagined it could be. I don't think about Victor often anymore. Sometimes Patricia mentions something he's doing, and I nod politely. He eventually moved away, tried to start his own consulting business, and mostly kept his distance. I heard he struggled, his credibility never fully recovered, but that's his journey, not mine. What matters is what I learned. That kindness without boundaries is weakness. That documentation is a form of respect, not suspicion. That when you build something real, you have to protect it not with anger or aggression, but with clarity and truth. The contract that sits in my office now isn't a reminder of conflict. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to play someone else's game. Document your truth. Set your boundaries. And then let that truth speak louder than anyone's overreach could ever be. My business is mine. It always was. And now everyone knows it.